This is BBC Wales. The time now is 9 o'clock. There now follows a party political broadcast by the SDP.
In 1940, Europe meant only one thing: war. For grown-ups, it meant risking death, losing loved ones and family. For children like me, it meant an absent father, off with the British Expeditionary Force for France. Indeed, when my father came back from the war in 1945, I, like many others, did not even recognize him. After the bombing and the devastation, the people and politicians of Europe vowed that war must never happen again. A peaceful Europe, a Europe without war, was to be the great prize. The first step was to lock together those arsenals of war, the iron and steel industries of France and Germany. The European community was the next step, because countries which trade together find it hard to fight with each other. We must never lose sight of the purpose and the ideals of the European community as we face new problems and dangers. After Russia slammed down the Iron Curtain, the United States, thankfully, stayed in Europe. But we cannot guarantee that they will stay on indefinitely. We have, over the years, grown too dependent on the United States for our security in Europe. Now Europe must shoulder more of its conventional defense burden: ships, aircraft, the very equipment which, because of Trident, this government will be cutting into in 2 years' time. If we do this, it will also allow us to move NATO's strategy towards never being the first to use nuclear weapons. Social Democrats believe that it is quite wrong that cruise missiles could be fired from our country without a British Prime Minister authorizing British forces to release the safety catch. This is not anti-Americanism, simply the assertion of British common sense. The SDP believes that we need a minimum deterrent, like Polaris, but that we cannot afford Trident. Eventually, it may be wise to put cruise missiles to sea and not have them on land at all. It makes sense, too, to pull back battlefield nuclear weapons from this frontier between East and West. For here, weapons could easily trigger a nuclear war. Meanwhile, Britain should not be adding even more missiles and even more warheads with Trident to those we currently have. In dealing with the Russians, President Reagan has been far too strident, and Mrs. Thatcher all too often follows suit. We value the American alliance greatly, but history shows that Britain must develop as well closer links with Germany and France for our security in the last resort. Peace is the first great challenge. The second is science and technology. Divided, Europe is losing ground in the new industrial, technological race versus Japan and America. Europe will fall back unless we work even more closely together to develop our own new technologies. Ariane, for example, is a European rocket for peaceful use. New industries like this are essential for new jobs and a future for our young people. Britain's politicians cannot go on whining on the sidelines of the community. We cannot go on blaming everyone else but ourselves for our relative economic decline. The SDP was created only 3 years ago to help unleash the energies and the idealism that exists within our country. I believe that our children's future and the future of our children's children depends upon a peaceful and a prosperous Europe. That is why, in the European elections on the 14th of June, the Alliance of Social Democrats and Liberals is seeking your support, unashamedly and enthusiastically, for our commitment to the European community. If you want to help us and help your country, come and join us.
If you want to find out more about the SDP, phone 01 200 0200. Anytime, day or night. 01 200 0200.
That was a party political broadcast by the SDP. In 25 minutes, QED presents Potswoli, Death of a City. First, the 9 o'clock news with Sue Lawley.
Breakdown at the coal board. Scargill accuses McGregor of deplorable behaviour. He tells the miners, "You're being misled." Sit-in at the Commons, nearly 30 hours without a break. MPs are sitting in at Westminster tonight. They've been there since last night and they're fast approaching a record. They're trying to talk out or filibuster the government's plans to abolish the Metropolitan Councils and the GLC. But their sit-in has meant that a debate on the closure of the British Leyland factory at Bathgate has not been able to go ahead. The workers at Bathgate are sitting in too. If the MPs are still talking at 10 o'clock tonight, they'll have broken a 5-year record.
The House of Commons has now been sitting solidly, very solidly indeed, for 30 hours and 46 minutes precisely. The place looks like a tip. Crumpled papers all over the floor, crumpled MPs all over their benches. No one's actually nodded off yet, officially anyway, they never do. MPs always rest with their eyes closed, as they say. There have been, if anyone's counting, about 150 speeches, mostly because of a bitter row between the Liberal SDP alliance and Labour. Both are totally against the government, and both are totally against each other. The Alliance say that Labour's being lily-livered in their opposition to the government. Labour say the Alliance is infantile for, among other things, hijacking Labour's front bench earlier this morning when there weren't actually any Labour MPs on it. The Conservatives were awake enough to chortle at all this. This opposition squabble means that the government are getting a vastly controversial bill through a day earlier than they'd originally planned. Mrs. Thatcher bustled in at 7:45 this morning to cheer them all up. "Good morning," she said brightly to anyone awake enough to listen to her. Not a lot were. They brought themselves round with porridge and kippers for breakfast. The hundreds of staff kept on spectacular overtime wilted. And still now the speeches grind endlessly on and on and on.